Welcome to this video for A Christmas Carol. It's going to be based around the key quotations that you should be learning in order to generate a really good exam answer for Eduqas. Now, these quotations are going to be important to helping you tell the story, so you should be familiar with some of them, hopefully. So the way that we do it is for you to memorize the quotation by using a single word to chunk that quotation into your memory, and then we try and recall that full quotation via the single word. Okay, so if you need to pause the video or use your blue booklets now, then do so to have a quick revision, and then we will go through the recall. So that's now covered up. If you want to try and recall each one of these in turn and test yourself to see what you got. So pause the video now and make a note on your score, please. Okay, so quick check there, see which ones you got right. And then a reminder of how we actually recall those single words. So tight-fisted oyster surplus darkness mankind becomes tight-fisted oyster surplus darkens mankind. And that way it's easier to remember because of the grammar. Same, moving on to this one, same thing here. Chained beef chose tortured light. So again, you just change the grammar to make it more memorable. For this one, crutch spared the clerk's ignorance. Was shadow sponging honour as a question. And then last one, salary as a second blessing. Okay, so those are the quotations that you want to be remembering. So let's go through each of them now. Tight-fisted hand at the grindstone. So what does this mean? So have a little go yourself, and then here's your explanation. So a tight-fisted hand at the grindstone, it's referring to Scrooge. He doesn't let anything go. He's selfish. It metaphorically represents his work, and he's squeezing every last penny out of the people he's lending money to as a moneylender. Solitary as an oyster. So have a go yourself, and then here's your explanation. So Scrooge is lonely, self-contained. He is the oyster. He has a hard outer shell which is cutting himself off from the world, and therefore he is kind of a product of his own past, his own environment. So in more detail, that oyster perhaps has the hint of some goodness deep within him in the form of a pearl, but he's vulnerable, and so he puts up this shell. He puts up these walls to keep people away because he's hurt. It's a result of the pain in his past. If they would rather, better do it and decrease the surplus population. So this one is probably the most important quote in the whole of the book, if you ask me, and it's this idea of Scrooge not caring about the poor, and that's the reason why he needs to change. He sees them as surplus and spare, and in a higher grade answer you'd want to refer to the idea of Dickens being against the views of Thomas Malthus, and this idea that the poor shouldn't be allowed to die off because they have value, they have worth. So Dickens is disagreeing with Malthus's cold-hearted view of population and trying to feed a growing global population. Darkness is cheap and Scrooge liked it. Well, for this one, we talk about the idea of Scrooge not wanting to spend money. The darkness can symbolise both his unhappiness, but also the fact that he doesn't want to use his money for anything good. So he makes all this money and he doesn't even use it. And so symbolically, he wants to be surrounded by darkness and misery. He doesn't want to embrace light and hope and change. Mankind was my business. So this is Jacob Marley. Okay, so Jacob Marley is talking about the things that he should have been focused on in life. He talks about mercy, benevolence, forbearance, and all these sort of things that he realises were important and far more important than making money. And so he's trying to stop Scrooge making the same mistake that he did. I wear the chains I forged in life. So, again, this is Jacob Marley. These chains represent his sins, everything that he's done in his past life. He's now in a form of purgatory in the afterlife, and these sins are heavy. They're weighing down on his soul, and he's seeking to free himself from such sins. Okay, so you talk about breaking those chains. You may be an undigested bit of beef. So Scrooge is rejecting the idea of Marley being real. He's calling him a hallucination. He's saying that, if you're not real, then I don't have to believe in you. And it's easier for Scrooge to shut out the truth than it is to open up to that change. May you be happy in the life you've chosen. So obviously we're in stave 2 here, and we're talking about Belle. She's breaking up with Scrooge because of his love for money rather than her. And this is one of those reasons why Scrooge metaphorically became that oyster who shuts himself off from the world, because he's hurt. Why do you delight to torture me? So again, stave 2, Scrooge is effectively changing a little bit because he's feeling something, and by feeling anything he's therefore changing, because at the start he just dismissed everything that he was faced with, and so this painful past is kind of it's what he's being made to face up to. Scrooge could not hide the light. So the light from the Ghost of Christmas Past that sort of emanates from the top of its head represents this idea of truth and hope that we see, that you can almost like see the reason for Scrooge's possible redemption in the future if we understand why he is the way he is from his past. And so if he faces up to that light and faces up to that truth, he can change. But at the moment, he doesn't want to. I see a crutch without an owner. Okay, so now we're getting on to the Cratchits and Tiny Tim. So the Ghost of Christmas Present now in stave 3 is suggesting that if things carry on, then this crutch will no longer have an owner, that Tiny Tim will die. And so this really affects Scrooge because he recognises the innocence and vulnerability of Tiny Tim, and he realises that he is causing his suffering. And so this is where the guilt and the regret starts to come in. Say he will be spared. So this carries on from the quotation I've just explained, this idea that Scrooge is now desperate for Tiny Tim to live. So it's really showing how he is kind of pushing him further along that journey towards change and redemption. I should like to be able to say a word or two to my Clark just now. So obviously Scrooge's Clark is Bob Cratchit. And so if we think about this point, Scrooge is now realising the things that he's done have had a real damaging effect on the Cratchit family. So he'd probably like to say sorry. He'd probably like to explain things and maybe fix things. And so again, this is about him changing. This boy's ignorance, this girl is one. So this is from the end of stave 3, where we have the two children hiding under the robe of the Ghost of Christmas Present. And the boy's ignorance represents the ignorance of the rich towards the problems of the poor, whereas the want, the girl, represents the needs of the poor and how they're being ignored by the rich. So this is a big problem in Victorian society because the rich wouldn't acknowledge what was wrong in society, and they wouldn't face up to the issue of a huge problem in terms of the Victorian poor. I am not the man I was. So in this one, Scrooge is now basically saying he has changed. He's in stave 4, and after seeing his own death and being faced with all the people who don't care about him now that he's died and would just try and exploit his death for money, he's desperate to embrace Christmas and prevent this future from happening, and specifically prevent his own death and Tiny Tim's death. Are these the shadows of the things that will be or the things that may be only? So again, here he's talking about that future, and the idea of the shadow is that he's hoping for it to change just like a shadow can. And so this idea of will or may, he's desperate for a chance to actually change that future. Tell me how we sponge away the writing on this stone. So again, this is about Scrooge wanting to change. He wants to erase his name from that gravestone and therefore change his future because he's realised that he needs to change the way he's been in his past and how he will continue to be. I will honour Christmas in my heart and try to keep it all the year. So this is about the theme of Christmas spirit, because at first Christmas was a humbug and it was nonsense, and everyone who went around with Merry Christmas on his lips should be boiled in his own pudding with a stake of holly through his heart, as Scrooge said in stave 1. So it's a really good quote to use as contrast, because now he's saying he will respect it, he will love it, because he values family and other people over money. I'm about to raise your salary. So now we're in stave 5, and Scrooge is suggesting that he will improve Bob's living conditions and therefore improve the life of his family by paying him enough. And this is the message that Dickens wants to send out to all of the Victorian rich, that they need to actually help the least fortunate in society. And to Tiny Tim, who did not die, he was a second father. So now he's realising that family is important, that he's going to actually feel that emotional connection to Tiny Tim and to the Cratchits and realise that it's not just about himself and selfishness, other people are important. And then God blesses everyone. So it's really important that that the story ends on this idea of Tiny Tim's message, because Tiny Tim is the one who affected Scrooge most of all. This quote was actually first used in stave 3 when Scrooge saw the Cratchits celebrating Christmas, and now he's realising that the Christmas spirit and family is the blessing. It's not money. It's not material things, and it's appropriate message for the ending of the book because Dickens wants his readers to realise that it's not about chasing material things. It's about becoming a good person and looking after those who need help, particularly the poor in this case. Okay, so try and revise all of your key quotations and be confident in discussing them and discussing the themes and the writer messages in particular that go along with whatever section in the book that quotation is from. Thank you.